finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
All right, so this week we're going to start a series about pharmacy, and I affectionately am calling this Drugs in My Pocket, after the famous or infamous song by the Monks, which was a British new wave / punk band that had an album called Bad Habits in 1979, and on the cover, of course, was a nun with her skirt pulled up, smoking a cigarette in the men's washroom.
Oh my gosh, let's just
totally
get
politically
onto
correct
the
by 1979 standards. Not so much now. And they had two hits that were actually fairly big hits, at least in my high school. One was Drugs in My Pocket and I Don't Know What to Do with Them, and the other one was Nice Legs, Shame About the Face.
Wow, really nice guys.
Tremendous.
But I liked punk. Did you?
Not really. I liked some of the new wave, but whatever. It kind of went from there straight into the hair metal and whatnot. So this episode will be Drugs in My Pocket, and I don't know how to pay for them, as most of us don't.
And the wonderful world of PBMs.
PBMs. If you thought differential equations and rocket science was hard, wait till we unpack, with again a word I hate, unpack how your prescription gets paid for with your insurance company.
And on that
it's
note,
amazing.
Let's pay for the show today with our sponsor, MR Insurance Consultants. I said insurance incorrect. Pardon me.
Insurance?
Let's not butcher our poor sponsor. Before we get into this, they want us to let you know that MR Insurance is a small business that helps physicians with their disability insurance needs. And Michael Alrelvis is a CFP professional and insurance agent committed to helping physicians nationwide with their term life and disability insurance needs. He provides an objective, transparent, and education-focused process that aims to help physicians make prudent decisions and avoid overcomplicating things. He exclusively offers own occupation disability insurance policies for residents, fellows, and attending physicians. We know he'd be happy to help you with whatever your needs are. You can find Michael at drpodcastnetwork.com/MR Insurance or contact him at 800-817-4522. I will link that in the show notes. He's been a frequent sponsor and really good guy.
I'm out of life insurance in 2 years and will probably be uninsurable at that point based on my
better call Michael
habits. But that's okay, because I don't want you having too much money if I get mortared on a motorcycle ride to spend with some 28-year-old Peruvian bodybuilder. That's just me. Sorry.
All right. Keep listening.
So we're going to start a new series with Dr. Lee Strandberg, who has been in the pharmacy world for 40-plus years. I had the pleasure of working and meeting Lee through some insurance company work that we did on a pharmacy and therapeutics committee, where I learned a lot. I learned a lot about different pharmaceuticals and, more importantly, how the business side of pharmacy in our convoluted medical system works. So Lee is Professor Emeritus, Pharmacy Economics and Public Health, Oregon State University, and was Director of Managed Care Pharmacy for Samaritan Health Plans from September 2005 to June 2011. Currently, he is Pharmacy Director for Connect Incorporated, which is a very interesting company, which we may get to at some point. He was appointed 2010 by the Governor of Oregon for Health Policy for Medicare, Medicaid Integration of Care Services. He's worked in numerous states and provinces and even all the way into Australia. He's helped set up pharmacy committees even for Coors, I understand. And he has worked in the retail side, the academic side of pharmacy, and the policy side. So basically, Lee has done almost everything in pharmacy except sold heroin on the corner. But maybe he has. I don't know. So welcome, Lee.
Well, thank you. I don't recall. We had one student years ago got arrested for heroin possession or something, but that was only 1 out of 30 years at Oregon State. So that was a good number.
That's a great run. So what we're going to talk about today is PBMs, which sounds just amazingly interesting. But
to me, it sounds like before you told me about it, it was like PB&J. I was like,
right. It's a little more complicated than that, as we'll see. But basically, what I had learned, and I tried to explain to May, and Lee will do a much more eloquent job of it, is essentially how the business side works. If you as a physician write a prescription for a patient, it gets sent to the pharmacy, patient gets said pill, gets covered by insurance. How does that work? We think, okay, well, the insurance company just pays for it and that's the end of it. Actually, it's much more complicated than that because there's these things called pharmacy benefit managers that manage the payment and business side of how prescriptions get covered. So to start with, when did this all start? What was kind of the genesis of the concept of PBMs, this outside entity managing pharmacy payment?
Well, it was in the 1960s, and there was some pharmacists in San Francisco Bay Area that developed the concept of a pharmacy dispensing fee. They went around to pharmacies so they could sign this up, as opposed to how do you bill insurance plans and all this kind of stuff. And there was a wholesaler, as I recall, McKesson started out with a pharmacy processing system as part of their wholesale business. And over the years, they had to negotiate with insurance carriers for prices for dispensing fees and so forth, and they negotiated those things downward and downward and downward, so it becomes a margin problem for all the pharmacies. So the wholesaler decided it was not in their best interest to continue being in the PBM insurance business because it was putting their own network of pharmacies at financial risk. So that was in the 1960s as the whole thing started to evolve. But basically, to answer your question, so it's been around for a long time. And right now, let me just give you a background overview of the impact of PBMs, and then we can talk about how when a physician writes a prescription, how does that work in terms of getting paid and so forth. But let's set the stage in terms of the magnitude of this. I went and looked up some stuff the other day, and as of March 16th, there was an article by the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, and it provided a nice overview of PBMs, or Pharmacy Benefit Managers. And today there are 66 PBMs operating in the United States, with the three largest: Express Scripts, an independent publicly traded company, and I'm reading from their internet piece right now, a CVS Caremark, which is a pharmacy service segment of the CVS Health Pharmacies and a subsidiary of the CVS drugstore chain, and Optum RX, which is the pharmacy service segment of United Healthcare. And these three PBMs control approximately 89% of the prescription drug claims in the United States. So 3 of the 66 control 89% of the business. So it's a fairly dominated, I forget the term from economics, oligopoly or something like that. We have just a few major players in the market. It's not a monopoly, because a monopoly means you have one, but this would be an oligopoly. And so,
or a creptopoly where you steal it.
a creptopoly. Well, you got to go back to economics 101 in college, which for all of us is a long time ago. So I think those terms are still the same. But anyway, so a physician writes a prescription for drug X, and either transmit electronically or once in a while hands the patient a piece of paper now. Most all everything now is electronically coming into the pharmacies, which has really helped out everybody. So the pharmacy gets a prescription for drug X, and the pharmacy already has the patient's eligibility information in the computer in terms of what insurance company to bill. Say it's insurance company X, and there's lots of insurance companies. So the pharmacy already has John Doe's or Jane Doe's prescription personal information in the computer, the date of birth and sex, and what insurance carrier it is, and all the numbers that the pharmacy technician needs to make the prescription process through the computer system. And so the pharmacist gets it in there, and the PBM already has, in concert with the insurance carrier, already has set up the plan benefit design. So when I was pharmacy director for a large insurance company, we had to submit to Medicare and Medicaid and also to the private sector plan benefit design. Here are the drugs you're going to cover. Here are the copays for the generics. And you give it. We established years ago a zero copay for some generics that were inexpensive and very beneficial. Some drugs had a a small dollar copay, and then there's a brand copay that we would establish, or the PBM might have their own formulary committee to do that, and then there might be a brand copay for a preferred brand, and then if there's a non-preferred brand, which means that the PBM did not negotiate a rebate for that particular drug, or the price was higher or something like that, then that copay would be much higher, but double the preferred rate. So a person can get the non-preferred drug, but you still have to pay for the copay of all of that stuff. So that's how that kind of basically works in that side. And the formulary then was set up by either the insurance carrier or the PBM through a P&T committee. And so the pharmacist processes a prescription, gives it to the patient, and says, this is going to be a $10 copay, and the patient pays a $10 copay, and the patient is out the door and all that stuff. Well, the insurance company does not pay the pharmacy. The PBM pays the pharmacy. So the pharmacy will transmit these claims, and they're not paid in real time. There's a 2 or 3 day adjudication lag. So the pharmacy will then transmit the claims, and then after 2 or 3 days, they're adjudicated by the PBM. And so the PBM will have 1 week's worth of prescription claims for pharmacy chain X or pharmacy X, and then they'll say, okay, here's then the PBM will have paid the pharmacy 2 or 3 days later, but then the PBM bills the insurance carrier for the $20 million that they have spent or paid for on behalf of patients that are covered by that. So there's basically a computer tape transfer of all the data from the pharmacy to nothing's done on paper anymore. Nothing's done. There are no hand claims in pharmacies anymore. Everything's 100% computer. So that's basically how it would all work. And so it's the pharmacy gets the prescription, processes it. The PBM pays the pharmacy. Then the PBM, after the fact, sends a bill to the carrier, and that's the PBM. One of the ways the PBM gets reimbursed. It's not all.
So what is the advantage of the PBM to the insurance carrier? Because like I hear this and I'm like, you're going around and around, and there's all these different payers. Yeah. Why wouldn't the insurance company just have its own? You got a P&T committee, you got pharmacists that work for your insurance company. Just negotiate directly with the drug companies or whatever. What is the advantage in sort of offloading that side of payment to the PBM?
Well, there are companies. The reason most insurance carriers do contract out with PBMs is that it is extremely complicated and expensive to have a network of pharmacies that covers every pharmacy in the United States. I forget the exact number, but it might be 60,000 pharmacies in all 50 states and territories of the United States. Well, if you're a national healthcare insurance company dealing in all markets, in all zip codes, you've got to have a pharmacy in all zip codes, or at least some semblance of a pharmacy in all zip codes. And you can't have a single carrier insurance company do that in addition to be an insurance company. It is far too complicated because then you have to do contracting and so forth and so on. So I've known of one insurance company that did set up their own PBM. I had a former student of mine, in fact, that used to run a company that would contract out and set PBMs up for you out of Chicago. And so that was his total job, and he would have a whole computer system. He'd have a network and so forth. But you'd bet he would be working directly for the insurance company, and the PBM is usually owned by somebody else. And so the way you want to look at that is that you want to follow the money, like those old lawyer movies. I think Tom Cruise was in one. Follow the money. And so where does the money go? It's who owns the PBM? That's where the interest lies. And if you have a company that that's not owned by that's not a PBM owned by some entity like a insurance company or a pharmacy chain or something like that, then that PBM is going to work for you, the insurance carrier. So, but you've got to be really big in order to do that, and have a pharmacy director and a staff on site that really knows what they're doing, because then you can start doing the rebates, and all the money and all those kind of things all come back to you, the insurance company, not back to the PBM.
Okay, so for people who are really new to, like for me, it was brand new. And so basically to summarize and break it down simply is I go with my prescription for, say, amoxicillin to the pharmacy, and they say, yeah, it's a $10 copay, and that's based on the insurance, not the PBM, correct?
Correct. The
right.
P&T committee is that's all set up ahead of time. The plan benefit design.
So I pay my copay, I get my amoxicillin, and now my friendly neighborhood pharmacist submits the bill to the PBM because he knows what insurance I have.
Correct.
And that PBM depends on my insurance, correct?
Correct.
So he sends that to the PBM. here's the bill for amoxicillin, and then the PBM bills my insurance, Great Care or whatever you want to call it, and says, now please pay us for this amoxicillin. What about if now I have multiple prescriptions, I have all kinds of health problems, 10 prescriptions. Do those all go to the same PBM? So is my insurance only going through one PBM for all medications?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So then the PBM, they are buying all the drugs, basically.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And wow.
Okay, so where it gets really like where I just have flashes of, the Corleone family versus the Genovese family, et cetera, is you have three companies that basically run the market.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
So you have a golf court plus one guy running beside the golf cart,
mm-hmm.
and so they have tremendous amount of market power. How do they make their money?
Well, the PBMs will make their money in a general sense the following ways. One is that they charge the pharmacies a transaction fee. Every time the pharmacy clerk clicks to send a transmission through the computer system, there's a charge for that. And if the clerk is making errors on, say, 2 prescriptions, and the third time gets it right, there's a transaction fee every time. Every time something runs up and down the computer pipe, there's a transaction fee for that.
You're fired if you make too many of those mistakes.
You do about 20 of those, you lose all your money. So then they'll do that, and then they'll make money on rebates. And the rebates, the PBM will negotiate with the manufacturer a price, and then a guaranteed volume. Then they'll make rebates. And pharmacies today, retail pharmacies today, make their money on rebates rather than dispensing fees, because the dispensing fees that pharmacies get paid are basically at cost or a little bit below cost of operation. And so if you're a pharmacy, you want to have one primary wholesaler. And if you run X number of hundreds of thousands of dollars through that portal, you'll then get a rebate back on sales. I think new car sales run the same way. There's a rebate.
They run exactly the same way.
A rebate on sales.
They make hardly anything. Just tiny points, like maybe $500 or $600 to the dealership when they pay the salesman, et cetera, on a $50,000 or $60,000 car. It's very, very low, but it's all back ended. So they make a ton of money on rebates that they get based on how much they sell. I think they get rebates based on for sure it's on financing. That's where they really make a pile of money. Yeah. You sign everyone. You buy a GM car, you sign them up through GMAC. You get a huge rebate at the end of the year for all of the financing.
So the drug business operates. It seems to be very similar. Once you do, you lock into an entity that you're doing business with, and the more business you do, the more incentive you have to do stuff like that. So rebates are a big feature of all of that. So the clicks for processing the claim, the rebates based on sales and so forth like that. And another one that's not widely recognized, but also mentioned in this National Association of Insurance Commissioners article, is something called spread pricing. And some PBMs do that, some don't. I guess it's a matter of, I think Medicare and Medicaid outlawed spread pricing in the Medicare and Medicaid world. It is not outlawed, to my knowledge, in the private sector world. So if you have somebody who's running an insurance company that doesn't understand how these things work, or you're directly contracting as an employer with somebody, and you're a business person contracting with a buying group, how do you know? If you're selling cars or widgets, you don't know all this other kind of stuff. And so what spread pricing amounts to is that, and I ran into this when I was pharmacy director for a large insurance company, is that the insurance carrier might be billed $20 for a month's worth of simvastatin. That's just an arbitrary number. It could be more or less. You billed X dollars, say $20 for a month's worth of simvastatin, or 90 days, whatever. And then that's what the insurance carrier has to pay back to the PBM based on this after-the-fact stuff. Well, the PBM, if they do spread pricing, will pay the retail pharmacy, say, $8, and then they'll keep the difference. That's what's called spread pricing. And so, if you don't, so if you're an insurance company, you've got to be very careful and know what that all is and how that all works. And so those are the main ones. And go ahead.
Yeah, no, but the spread pricing sounds incredibly. When you have an 89% of the market run by Three companies.
Three companies.
That spread pricing sounds like you could. That's one step away from extortion, really, when you think of it, potentially, right? I'm not ascribing motive to anybody, but you own the market, and you're like, okay, I'm huge. I'm a massive company. I go to Pfizer. I go to these companies. I negotiate for their drugs. I get a certain price on it, and then you have to buy it from me because you're making your money on rebates.
Right.
So you're basically stuck with getting stuff from me, but then I fix the price.
Well, it's a matter of an unwilling of a buyer. I forget the term in economics, but it's a basic economics. If you're a knowing and if you're a buyer of something, and you know what you're buying, then you can be more intelligent in your purchasing service. So if you know what to look for, you can then put that into the contract. As a buyer, like I'm an insurance company executive, and I'm negotiating with 5 PBMs because they want my multi-million-dollar a month business. Part of the contract feature will say, I do not allow spread pricing. And the PBMs will come into the insurance carriers, and they'll say, this is what your cost is going to be per transaction or per claim, or your per paid claim cost is X or something like that. So the insurance carrier has got a fixed cost. I know it's going to cost me this much money per prescription for paid prescription claim. And last year I had 30 million paid prescription claims. So there's a fixed cost to the insurance carrier based on all of that stuff. So the PBM is to their advantage then to find ways to keep that per prescription cost low. And how you do that is by all the other things in the back end that backfills the profit side of the thing or something like that. So, like in retail pharmacies, they may just have that transaction cost equaling their cost of operation, so they break even, and then their profit actually comes from other stuff, like these other business models we just talked about.
So what about the other arms of all of this? So the PBMs are getting the drugs from the manufacturers.
Well, they don't physically handle the drugs. They negotiate prices.
Right, sorry. Correct.
Yeah.
So they have to negotiate with each entity that, I don't want to even throw out names of different drug companies, but they have to negotiate with each one of those that makes everything from antibiotics to cardiac drugs. So they negotiate with all of those companies.
Well, let me
for prices. Is that right?
Let me just explain how that works. Say, for example, you have in the world, there's a world market for generic drugs, and there is X number of generic drug companies all around the world. I don't even know how many there are. The way the insurance carriers manage that, they don't negotiate with each individual company because some might be overseas, some might be the United States. It's just who knows where they're at. What they have in place is called a MAC system, maximum allowable cost. So they'll say for amoxicillin, like your example, we will pay per capsule no more than, say, 4 cents for an amoxicillin drug per capsule. Say 500 milligram amoxicillin, you'll pay 4 cents for that. Well, if you have 30 of those, it's 4 cents times 30 is then what they will allow as a wholesale cost. So the pharmacist incentive is to find an amoxicillin that is 3 cents a capsule, not 4 cents a capsule. And so the pharmacy pieces, they have the pharmacies I'm familiar with, and I've been licensed for 50 plus years, especially as things evolved over the years into more computers. You have years ago, it was very casual on buying prescription drugs. It was no big deal. Now it's an art because you have to have one person or one part of your organization just doing the buying. Because if you buy prescriptions, if you buy your amoxicillin at 6 cents a pill and get reimbursed at 4 cents a pill, the more you sell, the quicker you go out of business.
Now, when you say pharmacies, you mean the drug companies manufacturing these, right? Not the
the retail.
The retail pharmacies. Because the thing that's going to make my head explode just thinking about this right now is, how do you ever start like back in the day? Most pharmacies were independent pharmacies. You went to pharmacy school. You're a pharmacist. You open your business. You do prescriptions. You sell some knickknacks, whatever, and you do. It's a good living. It was a great business. How can anyone do that now?
Oh, you really. It's very rare that this happens. Very, very rare. And if they are an independent pharmacy, you might find they'll be part of a buying group, like a wholesale drug company like McKesson and Bergen, and I forget, might be some other ones. They have their buying groups, And so if that pharmacist is an independently owned pharmacy, one person owns the pharmacy, they're part of a buying group that's linked to their wholesaler. So that's how they get the drugs, and then they're linked into that wholesaler. So, and they'll watch. Then you can look at the computer screen every morning, and there'll be one person saying, "Okay, I know I've got to buy what's the least expensive amoxicillin I could get today, and tomorrow it might be a different price." But the buyer does not know that the MAC is set at 4 cents. The buyer is just finding ways to get the least expensive amoxicillin, and then when you get your adjudicated claims at the end of the week, then the pharmacy manager will go through that and say, did we lose money on any prescriptions? And if you lost money on those prescriptions, say you lost money on amoxicillin because you didn't know, you can't know, there could be 1 to 5,000 MACs in one insurance plan. And so you don't know what those all are. So at the end of the billing period, the payment period, you go look and say, okay, I lost money on my amoxicillin prescriptions because I was paying 6 cents a pill and I get reimbursed at 4 cents. I got to find something less. Then they go talk to the person buying and they recalibrate that process.
So you lost me, and maybe others listening too. You might have to simple it down for my brain because it's complex. So you're talking about the pharmacies now going out and having this purchasing power. I'm thinking in terms of the pharmacy is going to the PBM, and they're the ones negotiating, paying. They're the ones paying, but the pharmacist still has to buy the drugs. Is what you're saying? The
pharmacist has to buy the drugs at or below the cost of what the PBM is paying.
Got it. Okay, so we've got two different things going on. It's like groceries. So basically, the pharmacy has to buy the goods, which is the pills.
Right.
But then when they want to get reimbursed, they submit it through to the PBM to get paid.
Correct.
Got it. And so we've got the PBMs working with the insurance companies to pay. Then we have the pharmacies now on the other side of actually acquiring and negotiating deals for the price.
Yeah, the pharmacies own the inventory. So the pharmacies have to pre-purchase all of the inventory. And the pharmacy inventory could be $300,000 or $400,000 in a small pharmacy. So it's extremely expensive to stock inventory compared to the years ago. And so the pharmacist then has a huge incentive to buy drugs at or below the MAC cost on generics. And on brand drugs, what they usually do, there are two formulas that PBMs will use to pay pharmacies. One is the MAC price, which is called maximum allowable cost, and it goes back to our amoxicillin example. They'll pay no more than 4 cents a pill. If you can find it for a penny a pill, that's money in your pocket. And they also then for brand drugs, for which there are no generics, then it's average wholesale price minus 1%. So you have average wholesale price minus, pick a number, 20%, plus $2 or plus $1.50 or something like that. And so then you have to find, and then you have to, that'll be pretty well close to what the pharmacy's actual dispensing cost is. You might have a drug then, say some of the new biologics for rheumatoid arthritis or MS or something, those biologics can have a wholesale cost of $4,000. And so the pharmacy has invested that $4,000 minus that percentage. And so when the patients go into the pharmacies, unless they've got somebody on a lot of these drugs, they'll order those drugs. You call in a day or two ahead of time. You're going to get your biologic that's $4,000. That's not going to be in stock. You got to get that in on time the next day because you can't afford to carry that kind of money in inventory.
It makes sense why people sell heroin on the street now, and actually why they take it.
Yeah.
So, okay, so if I can reiterate this, so they have. I am an individual. I'm going to start the Ayn Rand Memorial Pharmacy, just me as an individual, right? And I take my pharmacy degree and I hire techs and I hire a couple other pharmacists and I own the business. So to do the buying, I'm going to have to negotiate with like a buying group to get any kind of like power in that market.
Or you choose a wholesaler that has a buying group already set up.
Right. So I have that wholesaler.
And they mostly do that.
Okay. So this is where it gets really, really crazy because I think I'm understanding this correctly. So I own the pharmacy. And I go to the wholesaler and I, try to get the best deal on everything I can. Mm-hmm. And then I fill my inventory. I got a big capitalization cost to fill the shelves. Okay, that's all good. And then now I'm going to go sell my drugs. Okay, so the prescriptions start flowing in, the drugs start flowing out. Patients are really happy. And then I'm getting reimbursed, not in real time, from who knows how many different PBMs. So literally, if we're just selling only amoxicillin, we're buying it from a wholesaler to go onto our shelves, to go to the patient. And then if I sell 10 different amoxicillin prescriptions to 10 different people with 10 different insurance companies, I'm getting 10 different prices.
That's exactly right. And the other problem that you run into is that timely payment to the pharmacy of submitted claims. If you get claims that are, say, 15 to over 15 days out that are not adjudicated, or 30 days out, then the pharmacy itself has a cash flow problem, because if they don't pay the claim, the PBM doesn't pay on time, or there's some problem of holding up a prescription, something like that, then the pharmacy itself can suffer a cash flow problem, because they might have $1 million out in claims that have not been paid, and they got $1.5 million in bills. And so there's a cash flow issue in some of those cases.
So don't the PBMs and the insurance companies know what the wholesalers' prices are to get these medications? I mean, they all got to know what, say the maker of amoxicillin, whether it's coming from like onshore or offshore, is charging these wholesalers, and they must have an idea so that the prices are pretty not competitive or close, or yeah.
Well, they do know what the MAC prices. They do know what the wholesale prices are on average, and I think there's some law someplace that says they have to set a reasonable MAC price. But the other thing that I noticed when I was pharmacy director is that we had multiple PBMs when I was pharmacy director for several years after I left the university, and each PBM had their own MAC list. Say you have, and I don't recall the total number of individual unique generics in the market today, but say there's instead of 10 amitriptylines, you have 10 milligram. That counts as 1, not 10. Say you have 8,000 separate unique generic drugs in today's marketplace, or 5,000. Pick a number. Well, I recall that the PBM would come in. One of them had 1,500 MAC prices, or 3,000 MAC prices. And the next one that came in had only about 1,500, had half the number of MAC prices. And so the question then is, what happens when you don't have a MAC price? And then the MAC price, then if there's no MAC for that drug, then it defaults to the average wholesale price minus a percentage plus $2. And so therefore, in the pharmacy world for generics, you have a very high average wholesale price, like the sticker price of a car for $50,000. But the actual price of the car is much less than the sticker price. So there's an actual acquisition cost that the pharmacy pays. It's not the average wholesale price. AWP is called ain't what paid. And so it's just like buying a car. So then, therefore, the insurance carrier could be paying dispensing fees of $100 for something because there's no MAC price in place. Now, why the PBM doesn't do that, I don't know. I can't figure that out. But I had that experience where they would not have MACs in place for some expensive generics where there was a big spread between the average wholesale price and the actual acquisition cost, and so that then becomes a real cost then to the insurance carrier, because you're paying out that kind of money. As opposed to paying $10 dispensing fees, you're paying $100 dispensing fees. So you have to have a pharmacy director or somebody at the insurance carrier knowing what all this is, and then you have to get the PBM to change their MAC list. And then if a drug goes MAC, how quickly does the PBM add that generic to the MAC list? They're all different. And they won't do it upon your request. They've got a process that they follow that puts a drug in place when there's 3 MACs in one place or 2 or something. Just because you got one generic doesn't mean you're going to get a MAC in place. Because if a drug goes generic, it shadow prices the brand drug, and it's only a little bit less, and it takes 6 months to a year before the price drops down to some other competitive level and other players come in.
Okay, I'm going to bounce around a little bit and throw some thoughts out that came in my head. But what about someone who's just shopping around and they're paying for their own prescription? You know, the one that everybody loves is that Good RX that you get the coupon for. So what's happening there? Is that basically when I go to the pharmacy and decide I need to buy my amoxicillin myself, or even it might be cheaper because I know what my copay is for some reason, and I decide to cash pay this $20 with this Good RX coupon, the pharmacist, is that like a separate PBM that's reimbursing them. Is that what GoodRx company is? Are they a PBM?
No.
Or what is that?
No, it's just a cash discount. What happens if the pharmacy's cash price for something was going to be $14, and you show a GoodRx card right there, and I don't know how they set that price. I don't know the mechanism there, but say they have the mechanism set at not $14 but $10. If you process a prescription through GoodRx, that pharmacy's gross margin drops from $14. You know, their margin will drop $4. So it's taking that money out of the pharmacy's margin, no place else.
So you mean the pharmacy's eating the cost?
The pharmacy's eating that cost on that.
So is there some kind of rebate that GoodRx does? Because why would anyone do that? Right. Why would anyone participate then? As far as
I don't know. I don't know how that operates, but there's no other way to me that would work, because they're not an insurance carrier, they're not a PBM, they're a discount card program, and so what they've done is automate. Years ago in the pharmacy world, if someone wanted a prescription for amoxicillin, you say, I don't have insurance, I'm going to call 5 pharmacies. The price checking thing that used to be common in the newspapers about every couple of years, where you call around and say which pharmacy gets you the best price. Well, this automates that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think it automates that.
The patients will sometimes tell me, or they'll ask me, they'll say, well, how much is this going to cost? Well, at first I say, I don't know, until you get to your pharmacy, and then they run it through your insurance. And then I said, but the other thing is each pharmacy, it's like going to a different grocery store. Like it would be like asking me, well, how much do apples cost? Well, I'm like, depends if you're going to Safeway or Albertsons or Walmart or the market of choice or the farmer's market down the road. The price of the apples is going to be different at each place too. Yeah. So that's kind of similar with
They're very similar, because years ago, before GoodRx, before computers, I was in the pharmacy world before computers were in there, and that's how it worked, because people would call around. And before insurance became very common, Medicare and Medicaid didn't start till '66, and so before and then private insurance came up, evolving over the last several years. But until there was an operating a computer system like a GoodRx or those other kind of cards that are out there, discount cards, then people just called around and asked what your price was, and they went to the pharmacy like the grocery store. I can get an apple for X or whatever. And so today, that's I think that is automating what used to happen verbally.
What about, I'm going to assume I know the answer, but I'll just ask this in case people don't. So when I go to the pharmacy, sometimes my copay is $7 always for a whole handful of drugs, but then there'll be other ones where all of a sudden the copay is $150 for this medication. Or is that, I'm going to assume, is that set by the insurance company, or is that the PBM, or what happens where copays vary?
Well, copays will vary based upon what the insurance carrier has told the PBM the plan benefit design is. And the insurance commissioner, we had to submit the plan benefit design to the insurance commissioner every year, and you're not allowed to change the plan benefit design for a whole year. And so you'd have your list of drugs. When I was director, we had a dozen or so generics, statins and some of the sulfonylureas and so forth, for those that were cheap, because it was better to have people to take their pills than not, because total health care costs, if people, from a pharmacist's point of view, if people take their pills, health care costs go down. But, and so if you have tiers of drugs, so you get a $7 one might be for a tier 1 generic, and then you get a $100 one, that'll be for a non-preferred brand. And some insurance plans will have a maximum amount of pocket cost of $150, and that's based on the processing data that goes in there. And so until you hit the $150, you're paying a percentage of something. So you have percentage copays, could be 50% of X of that calculated price, whether it's average wholesale price minus plus X or MAC or whatever. You pay a percentage of that, and you pay a percentage of that incentivizes people to use the generic drugs over the brand drugs. And I've had examples where people, I used, filled in for pharmacy one time. This guy came in with a prescription for something, for amoxicillin or whatever. And he said, no, I want the brand drug, because my wife only wants the brand drug or whatever. My husband only wants the brand drug. And so I said, well, it's going to be, $50 or something like that. And he said, I'll give you the other. If you use your generic in your plan, it's going to be $20. And in 30 minutes, he was back there because his or her spouse had said, I want the brand drug. And it's just because the doctor had written the the brand drug name on the prescription, not the generic drug. Therefore, there was a better drug because the doctor had written the brand drug on the prescription, not the generic drug. So people's prejudices are like that. But if you put money in there, he went back and the spouse said, I'm not going to pay $30 for something different and whatever. So it's a percentage copays tend to increase generic dispensing rates, and generic dispensing rates can be that makes a big difference in terms of the insurance carrier's bottom line, because your premium is the same throughout the whole year. Your variable cost will be if you're paying $100 for a brand drug versus $15 for a generic drug.
What regulations are in place as far as, because my paranoid side of my brain, what regulates PBMs as far as, because it just seems like there's an awful lot of potential kind of monopolization going on here, which doesn't tend to help, prices, which, doesn't help the consumer.
Well, the issue is when you get the discounts on drugs, does the consumer benefit? And in most cases, probably not. It benefits actually the insurance carrier, and that helps their bottom line and to increase their resilience or whatever like that. So I don't know if there are any regulations that manage the federal regulations, or there a lot of effort at the state level to force PBMs to be more transparent. And to limit what they can charge and so forth. So various states have tried to litigate, pass legislation that would be in favor of the pharmacies in those states, as opposed to the PBMs. The PBMs bring in the lobbyists and so forth, and it's in their interest to try to knock that stuff back, like a lobbying group is supposed to do. So I would suggest that the listeners just go to a Google search or whatever search engine you like and put in PBMs and lawsuits. And there'll be several pages of litigation against PBMs, including current ones. I got one here in my hand. Is from I think just a couple months ago. So
yeah, like it just. It's so convoluted and so complicated, and it's always what's driven me crazy about any overregulated industry or any third-party payment system. Okay, I get it. Certain things in healthcare are super, super expensive, so there has to be some sort of payment mechanism so that you don't have people, of that don't have the means. They could still get a bypass or their appendix taken out or whatever. I get that. But at the other side of the coin, we have just demolished the free market power of innovation and dropping costs and competition with this unbelievably complicated system. And this is just the pharmacy side, and so which is amazing to me because the consumer is so totally divorced from the payment, utterly. This is like differential calculus, trying to figure out all this kind of stuff, and it's clearly to the PBM's advantage to have this as complicated as possible.
They don't want transparency. I have great difficulty when I was trying to figure out the spread pricing stuff when I was pharmacy director. I knew what we were paying, what we were getting charged for the prescription, but I couldn't figure out what they were paying the pharmacy. I couldn't figure that out, and so it's a very, very complex, and the transparency issue becomes paramount.
But that's just nuts. You don't know, what you're paying, obviously, because the insurance company is paying the PBM, but you have no idea what they're charging the end user as far as the pharmacy.
What they're paying the pharmacy, I didn't know. I had to go figure that out because I knew people that ran pharmacies, and so I could find out what for the same. I had to go back for the same prescription, the same date, and look it all up.
That's just mind blowing.
Yeah.
So this is exactly like getting paid to do a different job depending on if they like you or not. It's like just negotiating contract, but different organization. Like if Tim got paid a different wage to go to work and do the same job I did, if I have my pharmacy and he has his pharmacy, he could be getting reimbursed or paid differently, or my insurance company is getting.
But I have the Ayn Rand pharmacy, so I'm going to charge way more money.
And guess what? I'm the PBM, and I'm not going to pay it.
I love it. See, it comes back to bite you in the ass.
You can charge whatever you want.
Right. There you go.
I'm not going to pay it.
So what about hospital systems?
Oh boy.
Okay, now this might be a whole other.
My head blowing up.
So that might be all another segment. But
where do you want to start?
For our listeners, PBMs. So if I'm in the hospital and I'm getting an infusion of antibiotics because I'm sick, does then that bill through my insurance and it goes to a certain PBM based
No.
on my insurance?
No.
Okay, so hospital systems are different.
Right.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
Hospitals will band together and have buying groups. Hospitals in different parts of the country will have buying groups of X number of hospitals, and they'll have an organization that's in a city that's run by pharmacists, and they'll be buying on behalf of X number of hospitals. And so, and I've had former students that run those things, and so they'll be buying on behalf of X number of hospitals, and they'll go out and negotiate D5W and all the expensive drugs you've got and all that stuff, because the drugs showing up in a hospital usually don't show up in a pharmacy, that type of stuff.
Oh, but wait, they do, because I remember a bill that I got for being in the hospital and seeing them. I've seen them on patients' charges where sometimes they itemize them, and it's ridiculous. It's like $5 for an acetaminophen. I'm like, what the heck? You could have bought a whole bottle.
Well, if you talk to the friends of mine that run hospital systems, they'll say that it's their cost of operation going and being allocated out.
It was the smoking hot nurse that gave you the that's what you're paying for.
No,
for the delivery. You're paying for the delivery, right? It's like when you go to a football game and it's the $10 beer, but you get to drink it in front of live sports.
That's what you do. Yeah. But what I've heard though, seriously, is that it's like there's some excuse where they have to crack open a new bottle of acetaminophen for each patient because of.
No, it's all unit dose.
Yeah, I know. I know that, but you hear all these things.
Yeah, it's all unit dose. Just like the individual coffee that's for the individual coffee thing. I don't call that coffee. I call it unidose coffee as a pharmacy person. You get that one individual package you put in or press a button and you make coffee. But no,
I need the IV coffee.
Yeah. So the cost of running a hospital are then put into certain areas of the hospital that are money makers, and some departments of the hospital are money losers. But the pharmacies themselves all band together in regions of the country and have buying groups, very large buying groups.
So, staying away from the whole hospital cost. I mean, the global picture I'm seeing, like the forest for the trees, because people get so upset about their cost of their medications and what it costs, and it's so prohibitive, and they blame Pfizer, they blame, just pick a drug company, and then they're so mad because it's like the drug companies, they're thinking the manufacturers are like taking on all our money and they're making us poor, when there's all these middlemen, I mean, from your insurance to these PBMs making money off of it. Correct.
Well, the question you raise there is a complex international question. When I used to work for the Australian government, the issues there where they have a national formulary, a national healthcare system, and they had what's called reference pricing. You might have 5 drugs in a therapeutic category, all deemed by the P&T community to be therapeutically equivalent. There might be some minor difference, but basically they're therapeutically equivalent. So there was a committee in the Australian government that would review these proposals, review all the drug data, and say, these 5 drugs are the same for our purposes, and we will pay this much. They might pick the price of the lowest one, or they might pick something a little bit less than that, and that's called reference pricing. And so they'll set the price, and they'll set the formulary. So you have a drug that's introduced and put in the market here in the United States that might not show up in the other markets for quite some time. I remember when Tim and I were on the P&T committee, a company came and proposed to us to have inhaled insulin on the formulary. And we said no, because the safety data were not correct. Well, the drug was already been approved and on the market in the United States anyway. And as I recall, 6 months later, after we had said no, the drug was taken off the market by the drug company. And I recall seeing in the recent year or so another drug coming back on that was an inhaled insulin. And so it might be a good idea at the time, but we as an individual committee thought the data were incomplete because it didn't have enough safety data, clinical stuff.
And that company was Pfizer, who may be embroiled in some ongoing safety data in the next couple of years, but we don't know.
We digress. But so, yeah, I mean, if I don't know, drug manufacturing company named Z is, say they make my EpiPen, because there was a big thing before.
Right.
So they sell the EpiPen, so they're selling the epinephrine pen to the wholesalers, and then my pharmacist gets it in. Correct? Is that? I mean, that's kind of in a roundabout way. The EpiPen comes to these wholesaling companies, and the pharmacist buys it.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's that cost. Then I go to get my EpiPen, and my insurance says, well, we'll cover this cost. I mean, isn't it? But there's room in between for all these middle people to be jacking up the price instead of the company that made the EpiPen.
Well, the EpiPen's a good example because that was on legislative scrutiny here within the recent years, and so there's no mechanism to control price what an individual private company charges. So if the EpiPen people or whatever company you want to choose want to go from $5 to $25 to $100, there's nothing to prevent that except for not buying the drug.
Right, but what if they're only charging $5 for this pen, and then the wholesaler gets it and like, well, we're going to charge $100, and then it goes to the pharmacy, and now the PBMs are in the middle. Like, I guess I'm seeing it as maybe the pharmaceutical companies aren't always the bad guy.
Well, the wholesalers have a markup that's in the contract, and so they'll have a markup on cost as a service, as what the pharmacy has to pay for their service. And so that's unlikely to happen. I've never heard of that happening in my experience. And so they'll mark up on cost, and there's a percentage that the wholesalers will charge because they've got to have money to stay in business also.
Yeah, but the ones that can control the cost the most clearly are the manufacturers, obviously.
Yeah, and then you get into the issue of international drug pricing, which is rather complicated. And so, and people think they could go and buy a drug on the internet. Well, you have no idea where that drug came from. Well, it's a Canadian pharmacy or whatever. Well, that might be a company. That might be a storefront, and you have no way of knowing where that company is actually located or where the drug came from, because it doesn't go through Health Canada if you just buy it from somebody says Canada. So it's all buyer beware when you get into that kind of situation.
No, and it's interesting because I saw a patient, and he was I think he was a PhD chemist, so he was like a pharmaceutical chemist. And I said, and they had some kind of bizarre problem because they had just come back from, they were living in India. And I said, well, you live in India? And he goes, yeah, we've lived there for the last, 10 years. I go, what do you do? He goes, I work for the FDA. And I was like, what?
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, well, every single drug that is manufactured offshore that gets shipped to the United States has to go through FDA scrutiny in that country before it leaves. And I'm like, okay, well, really? Like, they're making aspirin. Who cares? He goes, no, you care very deeply. And he told me, he said, because he's doing the mass spectrometry on all these and all this stuff. And he said, there's not a single drug for domestic use in those offshore generic companies that he would ever put in his body. I mean, he was like almost angry telling me this. And I'm like, it's that different? He goes, oh, no, it's totally different. He goes, you might get half the drug, half the dose in a pill. It looks exactly the same.
I read about those examples of that, and what happens is that if the drug company in that foreign entity is shipping a drug to a place that doesn't have an FDA, then they will do those kind of things because there's nobody there watching them. Like if you're a company, you're sending it to some impoverished country in Africa or some third world country, there are examples where there was just not, it was X, but there was nothing in it. But coming into the United States, they're much more likely to make sure it meets FDA standards. Otherwise, they would find themselves out of the market and litigated and for criminal charges.
Yeah.
And you get the Sarbanes-Oxley issue. I think that's what it's called. The CEO then is criminally charged and thrown in jail.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that too. I mean, they don't have FDA over in some of those countries, and
No,
they
they
just do
don't.
whatever they want.
Yeah, but there's still international law because otherwise all of this collapses, and a lot of these countries that need these industries, and they're dependent on these. It's like when we talked to Ben Westhoff about his book Fentanyl Inc. and how China has been just pumping in billions and billions of dollars into their domestic drug manufacturer because they want to become a pharmaceutical giant. Just like what was the first pharmaceutical giant in the world? It was Germany, right?
Mm-hmm.
Germany and Switzerland. Thank you, Germany, for bringing us methamphetamine, or as it was known, Pervitin. That's an other crazy story.
Well, it's how the German airplane pilots kept awake. It was an amphetamine type drug made by the German pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
And that's how they're able to fly those long missions at the German pilots in the World War II.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Wow. Well, that was eye-opening, and I've totally been enlightened in that. I mean, I researched a little bit about PBMs, because I'm like, I've not heard of this, and how does it work? But that's been really informative. You really explained it well, and now I know our listeners can go, who knew that all this
I
was
could give you
involved?
college credit for this, because it's a summary
Yes.
of a pharmacy and
Some
healthcare
CME.
system, pharmacy 765 class.
There you go. That's right. You can give us CME, and
give you some
everybody
credit.
CME
Yeah.
listening for this. Perfect. Well, do you have any other questions, Tim? Or
I don't think so. I mean, we're going to continue going through some of the pharmaceutical side with Lee over the next several weeks. I think it's really important as physicians. It's so easy to get disconnected from, you live in your own bubble. See a patient, they have strep throat, you write them a prescription for penicillin, you don't think about it. And, I think that there's a stewardship issue with sort of understanding how things work, because, there's political issues with regards to this. There's helping patients find discounts if available and all the rest of it. So I think it's helpful to know that. A couple of the other things, there's a couple things I really want to get into later, which is the, what's it called, the protected list that from Medicare?
Formularies?
No, the protected, where there's like the 6 or 7 different drug categories, pharmaceutical categories that have to be covered on Medicare. The
Medicare Part D.
Yeah, that one's really wild.
Yeah.
And then the other one, which I think has been manipulated to the advantage of a significant number of companies, is the orphan drug laws, which is a really interesting rabbit hole to go down.
I should mention in closing, the PBMs are not all bad. I was talking to a pharmacist friend of mine just recently, and I said, "Well, how do you, is there still, the price on generics, is it still, crazy like car sticker prices?" Yeah. And I said, "But what happened is that the PBMs will make the pharmacy meet certain dispensing metrics, and if you have a patient on a medication for a chronic condition, like thyroid or hydrochlorothiazide or whatever like that, that dispensing for that patient in that pharmacy has to meet the 80% of possession ratio, medication possession ratio. Because when the patient meets a medication possession ratio of taking the medication 80% of the time that the dispensing days, then that is ruled as compliant. And they will get reimbursed incentive dollars if their patients are meeting the metric of 80% or greater. If they don't meet those metrics, then they get money gets clawed back. So if you're a big chain, you could lose millions because you have a number of patients and whatever are not meeting the 80% metric. And so the pharmacy gets penalized for the patient's non-compliance, non-adherence issues. And so the pharmacies now have computer systems that will look and say, okay, Lee, you're taking your diuretic for your blood pressure, and if you're a week late on getting your prescription filled, my phone rings. The pharmacy will call me up because they're getting the penalty is huge. He said that's where they're making most of their money these days is being able to enhance compliance, because compliance is, as we all know in the healthcare field, a major factor. Medication non-adherence creates 13% of total healthcare cost. People not taking their drugs. I could spend a whole other hour just talking about medication.
Yeah.
I published in that stuff like 25, 30 years ago.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll have to get into that, because I wondered that, because I get my prescriptions filled at one local pharmacy that's like just a community pharmacy that's individually owned.
Right.
But I also get some from a big box, mail it in. I won't say their name. And I'm wondering why they keep sending me emails and they're bugging me. Hey, you're due for your prescription. I'm like, I just want to get it from my friend in town. It's because of the metrics.
It's the metrics.
Ah.
That's where they make their money these days. They don't make it on dispensing. So they're looking at finding ways to incentivize the community pharmacist to become more clinical.
I
in
wondered.
Which pharmacists are well trained to do anyway.
Correct. Yeah, of course. Yeah, so that's interesting. And of course, everything's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, and it's not that being big and gigantic and making lots of money is a bad thing. It can be a great thing because there's tremendous amounts of reductions in cost through volume and all the rest of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's just that, when I guess part of what we want, I mean, it's BS free MD, is to kind of bring to light how some of this stuff works so people can understand and can ask questions. But because, I mean, I had practiced for, honestly, I have no idea how many years, like 15, 20 years before I was on the P&T committee. And I mean, if a PBM would have fallen out of the sky and hit me in the head, I wouldn't have known what it was. And I'd written like tens of thousands of prescriptions by that point.
I might say, I've known you for many, many years. And your lovely spousal unit, which is a wife, but the thing that you brought really to the P&T committee meeting was your sense of humor and jokes. The knowledge wasn't really that great.
I love it. I love it. That's funny.
But it was your good jokes.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Tim's always there for the entertainment factor.
I just wanted to be clear about that. I'm a tenured professor, so I can say what I want, and there's no retribution, right?
Exactly. None.
Perfect. And on that note, I think it's perfect time to end, as I'm laughing. All right. So thank you so much for being here and enlightening all of us with this. We know there's so much more we could talk about, but for today, thanks for covering all that on the PBMs. Wow. Okay. I think, should we summarize? Because that was a lot to take in. If you're not medical and you're just a pharmaceutical consumer, not in the medical world, that might have been a lot to wrap your head around. So PBMs I'd never heard of before, and we kind of touched on, we tried to make it self-explanatory and simple as far as what happens when you walk into the pharmacy to get your prescription, how it gets, the bill gets sent up the chain, who pays for it and how, and on the other side, how the pharmacy companies or independent pharmacist acquires the prescriptions and how the back and forth between the warehouse side and the insurer and the payer is, and then on the top of the food chain is the manufacturer. So
basically how American healthcare insurance works is very simple. In theory, from 10,000 feet, it's very simple. There's the outpatient side. So if you go to see your doctor and he does a well child check for your child, that bill is sent into the insurance company, they pay it, in a few weeks, case closed. Okay. Now, if you get a prescription, you go into this other entire world of the PBM world and the pharmacy world that have to interact. So they're essentially subcontractors to your insurance company, which is completely crazy. And then there's a third tier, which is hospital, which is
we didn't even really.
No, of course not. Which is its entire other line of business. So
Can you imagine, though, if food was paid, if you had to deal with buying food this way?
Yeah, your TV dinner would be $50,000. But you see, it's absolutely amazing. So depending on where you intersect in the healthcare product line, there's 3 different lines of sort of business or insurance. And the insurance company that insures you has to intersect with their outpatient arm, their inpatient arm, and their pharmacy arm. And each one of those is tremendously complicated and individually negotiated with each company, which is mind-blowing. I mean, the fact it works at all is amazing. The fact it works as quickly as it does and everyone stays relatively solvent is just wild. And we expect people, the politicians come and they say, well, everyone just needs health insurance. Yeah, but it's like everyone needs to be able to assemble their own car. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, the whole concept of just giving somebody a payment plan without the interworkings of how the healthcare insurance industry and world works is very much like saying everybody in the world needs food and we'll just buy them forks.
I'm just nodding my head.
Because there's way more to the world of eating than forks. Health insurance is essentially the fork. There's an entire other industry of doctors and nurses and pharmaceutical companies and all the rest of it. That's the actual food. And we've stressed the fork and forgotten the food, which, hey, rest of America should just forget the food and we'd be a lot healthier.
Let's take the forks away. And on that note,
forks are killing people. You should only be able to have a fork with 3 tines.
There's some countries that have those. If you've done any fine dining, you'll note that. I think you eat oysters that way with 2 tines. Anyway, don't forget to reach out to MR Insurance Consultants, for their goal is to assist physicians in obtaining the most comprehensive coverage available to fit their unique situation. Reach out for both excellent and quality service at drpodcastnetwork.com/MR Insurance. And please remember, if you like us, share the show. Please give us a star rating. It really helps bump up the algorithm and gets us to the top of the podcast food chain so that other people can see us. And as always, find us online as well as Instagram and Facebook.
Outstanding. But remember, when you're on the top of the food chain, 2-tine forks only.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
While we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.
Totally politically incorrect by today's
My
standards.
mic was off.
That's okay. Your mic was off.
Yeah. Okay, we're back. That's a blooper.
Can add that in later.
Okay, start all over. Take 2.
Okay. Take 2. /